being the primary teachers of their kids while also being able to provide for the household.
Really bringing a unity to the whole
Supposed to
family. I
why the
believe.
Bible has Jesus at age 12 in scripture and
Absolutely. But
probably every day, right?
Welcome to Homeschoolpreneurs podcast. I'm Dawn Renee, and these are my guests, Mark and Jan Martinez. Mark works for an estate planning law firm and founded Crop Ministries, that means Christian Rite of Passage. He co-authored a father's story, Life Lessons from My Dad to You, with his daughter Kaylin. He also writes a column for a local newspaper and speaks at homeschool conferences across the Western U.S. Jan is an accountant and bookkeeper currently working with clients in Southern California and Texas. She homeschooled their two daughters, Kaylin and Elizabeth, for 10 years. They have been married 34 years. Mark and Jan now live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho area. Thank you for being here with me today, Mark and Jan.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, Jan, let's start with you.
okay.
This broadcast is about both homeschooling and being an entrepreneur so that you can build wealth from home while you're educating your children. Can you tell us a little about how your homeschooling journey began? What led you to the decision to homeschool your two daughters?
Actually, I'd been introduced to homeschooling when I was very young. We had family friends who homeschooled their children when it was definitely not the norm, and very few people were doing that. So that would have probably been in the early 70s. And after watching their journey and seeing their children as they grew, um, I was always open to it. And then as we got closer to having our children, getting to school age years, Mark's sister started homeschooling. And so, based on that, the background that I had already witnessed and seen, I felt a calling from the Lord to go to homeschool our children.
So it was family members that influenced the beginning of your homeschooling.
Essentially, yeah.
And what resources did you utilize?
Um, the homeschool conferences, definitely. Also, talking to different people that as I began to be introduced to the homeschooling community, I was able to ask questions of different people who were homeschooling, and I found different groups and co-ops to become a part of so that um, there would be a lot of integration with my girls with other kids, whether it was park days or being able to go on field trips with other children, assembly days, outside classes that we would join as well. Um, I wanted to give them a well-rounded schedule, basically, that included schooling at home that we did with our own curriculum, as well as the outside classes and those events that were available.
I think that was like a big thing for you was getting engaged in other homeschooling communities and
Yes.
sharing ideas and sharing curriculum. We like this one because it's classical, teaching type of thing, and others like, well, that's too hard for my kid because they're not wired that way. So just having that kind of
Right.
collaboration with other homeschoolers was real helpful, if I'm correct.
Yes.
A lot of parents, they, especially in the beginning, they struggle with their confidence. Did you ever have any negative thoughts or feelings about yourself when you were beginning homeschooling?
Absolutely.
Probably every day, right? Very normal.
But since we also started with kindergarten, I figured I would be able to grow into it with them, which would be a bit, I think I would have been far more intimidated if I were pulling a child from school and starting from there versus starting in the very beginning, so we could grow together.
Were there ever points where you felt like you needed to just throw in the towel?
There were days, yes, but never to completely throw in the towel, no.
Yeah, how did you work through those days?
A lot of prayer.
Hmm.
And having him come home from work and take the girls to the park or something to give me just some time to unwind and de-stress.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
wonderful.
I'll emphasize that also to any homeschool families where maybe there's ideally a husband or somebody else. You got to like come home from work and just say, listen, it's my turn to tag team and take the kids away and just give my wife a break because they're with them, the kids all the time. And even the most wonderful kids, you still need a break from. So that's a big, big deal is for the dads to be involved by just saying, let's just pick up the kids, go to the McDonald's playland, or wherever that has a playland, get something to eat, let the kids run around and burn off some energy and just give your wife some downtime.
Right. What about Jan? Was there any time in particular where you just felt extremely blessed about your opportunity to homeschool your girls?
Oh, I have a lot of really sweet memories that um, they still make me smile today.
Mhm.
You want to share one?
We, we had we had a room that was a bedroom, an extra bedroom that I had converted to a schoolroom, and we had a little sofa, tiny little sofa in there. And one of the history books that we were reading at the time started off with getting into the space pod. And so we would put our helmets on and we, get into the space pod. And then my arms would go around them as their seat belts. And then we'd take off and I'd make all the noises and I'd be shaking them around and shaking me around as we were taking off to another point in history. And then we would get into the history lesson. So,
That is really cool. Reminds me of that cartoon, The Magic School Bus.
Yeah.
yes, yes. And the sweet thing is, I was often, well, maybe not often, but I was accused of ruining their childhoods because of homeschooling, which um, is not true. But
Yeah.
um, this it was when we were getting ready to move. I was going through all of our school books, and I was doing two separate piles. One of the keep pile because those were the sweet memories for me, including that particular book, and then the other was to pass along to other homeschoolers. And my oldest daughter walked in as I'm doing this, and she's an adult at this point, and she starts going through this pile over here that was my keep pile, and she's like, "You can't get rid of this book." And she was going through the pile, and every single book was, "You can't get rid of this book." So it was very encouraging to see that the memories that I held as dear and precious, she did also. I was going to
Okay.
say, there was one point in time that I was the closest to throwing in the towel because um, the curriculum that I had was just not working for my oldest daughter. And I didn't know what to do at the time because we could not afford to buy a whole new set of curriculum. And I was, I remember sitting on the trampoline talking to another mom, and she very gently reminded me that God is in control of everything and to just pray about what to do. And I wound up going to a garage sale and finding an entire first grade curriculum for nothing essentially that I was able to continue and complete all of first grade with a completely different curriculum that better fit her learning style.
Isn't that just like God?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think, especially before people begin, they underestimate the power of God's provision and how He just will create opportunities like that where things are possible.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And for
I think of
for
the
me, mhm,
I think of the verse where it says, "If God be for me, who can be against me?" Right? And so we've seen throughout our lives, both through homeschooling as well as a number of different areas where God just does this amazing provision when we don't even expect it. And on one hand, we're like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing," and another one is like, "Yeah, of course, that's our God." So
right,
it's kind of cool.
never ceases to amaze us,
I don't
right?
see how anybody gets through life, much less homeschooling, without having the Lord at
I
their.
know.
I don't know how it's done.
I know. I can't imagine. For me, I used free resources. There were a few different places, one in Mission Viejo, one in Anaheim, that had these libraries where you could borrow the curriculum for an entire year. And it was,
Really?
yes.
Now you
Yeah.
tell us.
Before we continue, if you are a homeschooling parent and you're interested in building a family-centered business, be sure to subscribe and check out the Homeschoolpreneurs community. I'll put the link in the description. All right, well, let's talk to you a little bit more, Mark. Um, we'll switch over to you now, and let's just say first off that I have been reading the book that you and Kaylin wrote, and I just am, it's very endearing and touches my heart. It's very sweet. I know you guys were in our lives as I was a single mom homeschooling, and sometimes not. Sometimes my daughter was in a private Christian school, but other times I was homeschooling. And because I was a single mom, even though her dad was in her life, I was always looking for godly Christian men to um, speak into her life. And that's what this book was really all about. That's how you guys got the idea, because Kaylin had friends that um, didn't have a family like you guys have. So you want to say something about that?
Sure. How we that book came about was that my daughter Kaylin had given me this book for Father's Day one day called Your Father's Story. Dad, I want to know all about your life. And basically it was kind of a journal where each page had a different question, and then it was up to me to be able to share life history, family history, memories of Kaylin and myself when she was little, etc. And I thought this is really cool. I'm going to start filling this out. And so I started it by one question, a day, handwriting the answer to it. And then I found out it got really hard. It got really hard to complete it all. But I wanted to have something that was a legacy because, all of us have an expiration date, whether or not we want to admit it, we all have an expiration date. And so one of the things that I think I would have been tragic is to take my own life history and wisdom that you want to impart onto your children with me to the grave. And so I took it seriously. I finished this book, or as I was completing the journal, it had occurred to me how many of our daughter's friends, not just Kaylin, but both of our daughters, how many friends didn't have a dad involved in their lives, either through death, divorce, or just disengagement. And I thought, man, as I'm passing this wisdom on to my daughter and I'm active in her life, how many kids don't have a dad to be able to pass on wisdom into their lives. So that's why I suggested to her maybe when I complete the journal, we release it as a book and then just like a little intro and postscript part as well. In addition, that's geared for the book. And she said, yeah, I like to do that. So that's how that all came about. So that's kind of the dedication, like I said, in the book at the very front, every book has a dedication, to whoever, were influences. And I wrote, this book is dedicated to all the men and women, boys and girls who didn't have the father that they needed in their life. So that was the idea behind it.
So great.
And you did get the approval by the company who put that journal out in order to publish.
Yeah, just to be clear, the company called Piccadilly is a company out of San Diego that put together this journal. So I
Yes.
contacted them. I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm filling it out. My daughter and I want to publish it as a book. Can I have permission to utilize your questions so that we can publish it as a book? And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. That sounds fantastic. Please send us a copy when
Yeah.
it's done. So that's kind of how
Yeah.
that all came about.
That's so cool. I'm so glad
Get
they
it
let you do
legal. That's
that.
what you want
Yeah.
to do. Yeah.
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 My mom had bought one for my grandma and she never filled it out.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. We
does take a little bit of initiative, to really be consistent with that.
So here's what I discovered as well, because I bought one for my dad. He never did it either, and my dad's still alive. But what works in place that I started doing is I just took my phone, set up my phone, set up on a little tripod or something, and I just sat with my dad and I just sat with my mom and I just asked them the questions and just recorded it on video. So, because the reality, like you said, a lot of generations aren't going to sit down and write and commit to doing that. And like I said, it was a lot of work, but I was committed to it. A lot of people aren't going to necessarily. they might have that same commitment in their heart, but they don't really transition that to action. So that
Right.
would be a recommendation I would give to anybody
Yes.
watching is just sit down, turn on your phone, put a couple of lav microphones on each of you, and just ask the questions, and then let that conversation go wherever it goes. You may be take a completely different tack sometime, but that's okay. What you're really doing is capturing memories and you're capturing their heart, and I think that's more valuable than gold.
That's wonderful advice, Mark. I've known people who have done that, and I hope that our viewers will use that advice. For me, my parents and grandparents are passed, so it's not an option. But my mom was a pretty good journaler, and my daughter kept her journal. It
Hmm.
was a journal my daughter had bought for her, and it was just blank. But
Hmm.
my mom wrote quite a bit in there, and it was a gift
Yes.
to have.
Absolutely.
And
So,
I'm going to add this one last thing is that one of the things I've learned, and I also emphasize this in my crop program, is that um, everybody has challenges, everybody has hardships, everybody has difficulties, everybody has disappointments. Nobody's immune from that. And when we can capture the memories of our parents or our grandparents, you learn their struggles too. They had struggles, they had hardships. Some, of course, maybe more than others, but everybody has that. And life is not about how much hardship you have. It's about building the character to work through those things so that not only can you learn and not only can you be better, but that you could also first rely on God, have faith in him that he's going to work all things out because he already knows the future. It's just up to us to discover what that future looks like. And second, to be able to utilize those hardships, difficulties, those pains, those hurts, so that we can encourage others that are going through the same thing. So I always share with people there's nothing at all you can possibly experience that somebody else hasn't already experienced.
right,
So no hardship, no difficulty, no discouragement, no depression is worthy of taking your own life. Life is worth living. You just learn how to work through those things and rely on God and get help from other people.
right. Yes. Like the scripture that says, there's nothing new under the sun.
Yes.
That's wonderful. And so, Mark, let's get into what was your involvement in the homeschooling process when your daughters were being raised?
Okay, well, you can tell by her response. I mean, what was asking, like, how you doing, honey? How was today? Take these kids. Okay, take the kids.
The,
There were some days you didn't even have to ask me.
Yeah,
Just
some days
wanted
I
to
walk in
open
the
and say,
door. Come on,
okay,
girls,
let's
let's
go.
go.
the teacher rescuer.
Yes, the teacher
Yeah.
rescue. Exactly. So, I mean, ultimately, the true teaching and learning part was pretty much 100% her. I was more of the kind of encouragement,
The support.
the support, bail her out when she'd had enough. Not. I'm obviously it sounds like we're making her kids out to be little devils, but they weren't. It's just like
Right.
most kids they're your kids, right? So you just go through those things. So yeah, I was working and she was doing the heavy lifting with teaching her kids and maintaining our household. And so that was it. I don't think I ever came in, if I'm correct, saying maybe I did, I don't remember, but saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this, maybe we should put him in. I don't think I ever did.
No.
Yeah.
Uh-uh.
Yeah. So it was just
It
we
was
encouraged her
commitment.
because she had the conviction early on, like she had said earlier, that God had put this on her heart that she was supposed to do this. And then if that's the case, who am I to undermine what God put on her heart? And so that's why I wanted to continue to encourage her and as long as she is willing to do that. So that was my primary role in the homeschooling process.
As far as finances go, was there any point you or either of you were involved in entrepreneurship?
Well, kind of, sort of, but not really. Let me just tell you what I mean by that. Is in obviously 2008, for those who might remember, we had a huge housing crisis. We had a huge turn in our economy because of real estate, and that was the field that I was in. So in 2008, the girls were like 10 and 8 years old, I guess. Is that right? Yeah, because Kayla was born
Usually.
90. Yeah. So they're 10 and 8 years old. So that hit us as hard as everybody else in the real estate industry. So I wasn't making money as the bottom line. And then so I was trying like three other different business ventures, the stop dialing, the gold, the water machines, trying other things to try to generate income, but it just wasn't sustainable. I just wasn't, despite my efforts, it just wasn't sustainable. I didn't look for a traditional job because their high employment was so high, unemployment was so high. And so we struggled financially and we did not have weren't aware of any other resources that we felt we should look into from an entrepreneurial perspective for us to be able to sustain our family. And so this is my intrigue with what you're doing is that you're looking to be able to help families not only homeschool, but figure out how to afford it by being entrepreneurs, not relying on your typical stereotypical Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, because if you do, you can't homeschool your kids if you're working full time. So,
Exactly.
but we all need money to be able to pay the rent or pay the mortgage and utilities and food, all those other things, of course. And so that's why I love what you're doing is you're helping to teach, to coach, to mentor people on how they can do that so they accomplish both things, being the primary teachers of their kids while also being able to provide for the household.
Yeah, and even more than that, I believe that as the children grow, they will be able to participate in the business, and then the business becomes a huge part of their education.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it keeps the family in a really awesome position. I look at like Grant Cardone, for example. I've seen how he was able to do this with his girls and how entrepreneurial they are. Very
Mm.
skilled with sales. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're new to me, but I'm super impressed by this family.
Yeah, when you think of the stereotypical old businesses, how did kids get involved in the business? They started sweeping the floors and emptying the trash and doing your what would be considered grunt work, and they would grow and learn and mentor as they went along. As they got older, they learned more responsibilities. They were able to, they're able to think for themselves in terms of other ideas. That's how your typical family business was. So it's the same like today. The online community gives us opportunities that we've never had before. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, so that's what I love about what you're doing and what you're looking to accomplish here.
Thank you. Yeah, I really want to help families be able to bring their kids home and educate them. It really last year I started on this keeping kids safe journey,
Hmm.
and I was just thinking, one of the best ways that families can keep their kids safe is by home education. And
Yeah.
I've heard my whole life, well, the reason why I don't or I didn't homeschool was because I needed to work.
Hmm.
So let's tie the two together. Just like you said, with technology today, that is very possible.
Right.
Well, you are the founder and
Mhm.
author of Crop and Crop Ministries. Can you tell us a little about that ministry and how it got started?
Sure. So what I try to assimilate it to, what most people would recognize is most people have heard of a Jewish bar mitzvah as a rite of passage for young boys and young Jewish girls, bat mitzvah for girls. They typically have heard of a confirmation at seventh grade for Catholics, or a quinceañera for a Hispanic girl. Those are all intentional and deliberate rites of passages that recognize our children have stepped over from childhood into the first steps of young adulthood, not only physiologically, but also the expectations of responsibility and maturity. And so I recognized when my daughter was 12, about to turn 13, I found nothing that was comprehensive in the Christian community. And so I just felt like God had put something on my heart to develop a program that I can mentor her through because I had just finished reading this book that was written by Ken Ham. Some people know Ken Ham from Answers in Genesis, and another guy, Britt Beamer. It was co-written together. Britt Beamer was a researcher, and they researched and studied thousands of families where kids grew up in Christian households, went to church, went to youth group, went to Sunday school, And they discovered by the time they reached mid to late 20s, 3 out of 4 of them had disengaged. And so my from the church. And so my takeaway was that our Christian families and our Christian churches are having a 75% failure rate on successfully launching our kids from Christian childhood into Christian adulthood. And then who am I to think my kid's going to be the 1 out of 4 that doesn't disengage unless I do something different, intentional, and deliberate? So the book went on to talk about what the influences were that caused kids to disengage and when those influences began. The influences were basically culture, bullying, peer pressure, body image and shaming, world religions, sexuality, puberty, all kinds of other things that addiction, substance abuse, all those things. Those are the influences. And when did it all begin? In the middle school years. That's when the young people started going through entering puberty and experiencing or being introduced to things that are not good for them. And so I just figured I need to like sit with my daughter and prepare her for all these things that are going to come her way because when they do come her way, it's not going to be when mom or dad are next to her. It's going to be when she's out in the playing field of life out on her own. And so that's what I did. I approached her and told her about the book I read and how I wanted to walk her through this program and this I had this idea and I asked her, "Would you like to do that?" And she said yes. I'm like, hmm.
Uh-oh.
It was just an idea. I had like nothing. I had no resources. I had no nothing. And so I just felt like over the next few days, God was whispering in my ear, maybe more like shouting in my ear, invite others, invite others, invite others. And so I went back to her after a few days and said, remember we talked about this? Yeah, I just felt like God's telling me we should invite others, such as your friends and their families, to do this program, whatever it's going to be, with us together. Would you like to do that? And she said, yes. And I'm like, now I still have nothing, but I'm going to have accountability with other people. So I just started writing out all this list of things that I felt were important to talk about in life that could, if she made a good decision, can keep her on the narrow path which leads to righteousness. But if she made a poor decision, could help her step onto that wide path that leads to destruction. And so I wrote all these topics, put them in an order.
Can I
Yeah.
interject something here? The other thing I liked was how you approached it. Everywhere we went for several weeks, he had a yellow pad with him. And every young person in the early mid 20s, he would ask if they were willing to have the conversation. What are 3 things that you're glad your parents talked to you about? And what are 3 things you wish that they had talked to you about, but they did not?
Hmm.
And so he compiled a huge list from those conversations as well.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And
That
so
is
we
so
invited
cool.
her friends over to our house with their parents and said, I have this idea because I just read this book. We meet once a week for a couple of hours. This is the list of topics. Each topic we'll discuss. I'll do all the heavy lifting. I'll do all the writing. I'll do all the study. I'll find additional external resources which support the points. I'll find out where everything is in scripture. All you got to do is show up and bring your kid. I can't make it any easier for you. Does anybody else want to do this? And we had some families that said, yeah, we'll do that. So that's what we did. We selected a start date. We met once a week for a couple of hours. We started going through each of these lessons, these topics. Well, what happened is that the families that were going through this invariably would be talking to other families. On the softball fields, our daughters played softball, so on the softball fields at church or whatever, and people would say, I've never heard of anything like that. I want to do that for my kid. So when we completed the program with Kaylin and her friends and their family, we started another. Same type of thing. They would talk. I want to do that for my kid. When we graduated them, we started another. So we always had a pool of people ready to go to do this program with their kids. And so that's how Crop got started. And I give Jan the credit for the name because Crop stands for Christian Rite of Passage because I was really toiling with what should we call this Christian Rite of Passage program? And she says, why don't you call it Crop? You go, where do you get that from? Christian Rite of Passage, CROP. I'm like, oh, oftentimes say sometimes I think I'm a slow learner. That was an example of that. So,
Well, and it's a cool name because, I just think maybe like raising our children is kind of like a garden, and it's
Mhm.
when the crop is ready, for harvest, this is what we are putting out in society is what we have produced, right? From raising
Yeah,
our children.
it has in fact taken on a agricultural application, like you mentioned, because the curriculum is broken out into what's called 5 units, and the first unit is called the root, followed by the trunk, followed by the branch, followed by the limbs, and the fifth and final unit is the fruit. So in other words, like, we're building and harvesting and investing in this tree that is supposed to produce fruit. And ultimately, the fruit that we want to produce are grounded, responsible Christian young men and women who own their faith, who honor, respect, and obey their parents, and recognize that they have a calling on their life and that life is not about themselves. It's not about self-indulgence and self-fulfillment, but it's rather about discovering what your God-given calling is and to pursue that. So that's kind of the premise of it. That's the graduation process, is that now you're responsible for these things. And oh, I, as mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, who's ever leading them through it, I now recognize you not as a little child, but as a young adult. Not yet mature, fully mature, that's a lifetime process, but that now you're going to be more responsible for your decision making, and I will help guide you and direct you into that as much as you're willing to receive it. So that's kind of the premise of crop.
So for our viewers who are interested in purchasing the curriculum or getting involved in crop ministries, where do they go?
Of course, the website, cropministries.org, CROP, crop ministries, plural.org. I also have a Facebook site, which is just Crop Ministries if you're on Facebook. I do have a Instagram site as well, but I confess I haven't done much with the Instagram other than having the label, but that may change. But that's really what it is. Now, we also have a school system. So this is similar to how you utilize school, SKOOL. If somebody is currently on the school system through Homeschoolpreneurs, through your channel, they just have to search Crop Ministries and you'll find that there as well. And just add that, follow that as part of your community. That's another easy way to do it too.
Very cool. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm really liking school.
Yes, it's a good delivery mechanism.
Yes.
And one thing I do want to add about the groups when they meet, it is girls with a parent or boys with a parent. They are not mixed. It's not a
Mhm.
co-ed on the kids
Kids are too
at the kids
squirrely at
age.
that age when
Yeah.
they get together. So you got to keep them separate, and
I can imagine.
yeah. And as I mentioned, or as Jen mentioned, it has to be a parent or a grandparent or another adult mentor. Sometimes a grandparent, because I've had families go through the program where the grandparent was raising the grandchild because the actual parent incarcerated, drug overdose. I mean, any number of things that they did. They weren't involved in that child's life, and so that's kind of what we try to do, is help break that cycle, to help the boys understand the responsibilities of what it means to be a man, and also help the ladies understand what it means to be a lady, what it means to be a woman. So.
Well, and you are going around to conferences and speaking and share a little about what you talk about.
Yeah, so I speak at homeschool conferences. I do workshops, and I also typically have a table there as an exhibitor at the homeschool conferences. This weekend, we're exhibiting and speaking at the CHIA conference, Christian Home Educators Association, in the Los Angeles area. I actually have three speaking engagements. One of them is called Jesus at 12, why the Bible has Jesus at age 12 in scripture and not at any other age, and what we're supposed to take away from that teaching, based upon three principles for parents, three principles for teens, based on that scripture. That's one of my workshops. My second workshop that I'm going to be speaking on is the importance of having rites of passage in our young people's lives, and understanding what a good and healthy rite of passage is, both culturally as well as religiously or spiritually, and that if we don't, how culture is willing and quick to offer a fake, an imposter rite of passage in its place, joining gangs, getting drunk for the first time, getting involved in inappropriate sexual relationships, all those other things which are the fake or the false rites of passage. And then the third one I'm teaching is a session called Raising God Honoring Teens in a Media-Driven Culture. And the idea there is that media, digital media right now, of course, is something that is driving our kids. And we have 20, 25 years of research and history now to understand the impact that screens have had on our kids in the negative and how parents can establish guardrails to help mentor their sons and daughters into what would be considered appropriate usage. So I cover all the statistics, research that screens have had on our young people's lives, as well as share resources that are available that I've discovered that can help set up those guardrails.
That's wonderful. For both of you, what are your ideas, opinions, thoughts about the homeschool communities, and what you're seeing today compared to like when you were educating your daughters at home?
We're, I guess you can say, considered a hybrid education family because we homeschooled them. we we did all three. And so they got a taste of all three of those. And so what I've learned and what I've observed is it's really, really critical for a parent or whoever is raising the kids to really be aware of the uniqueness of their personality of their sons and their daughters. Because some of them they're like they need to be homeschooled. Others they want to be homeschooled. And quite frankly, some probably need a more of a structured traditional school system. And so I'm a believer first and foremost, if a family can and if they're willing and if the kids, the relationships are right, they should first and foremost homeschool. Ultimately, I say God didn't give our kids to the teachers or to the educators or to the pastors or to the coaches. They gave them to us as parents. It's our responsibility. We have 18 years to weave and invest in them what we've come to believe and what we value. And then they're released. We release them. I mean, releasing them means at age 18, they can legally our legal obligations as parents are complete. Those kids can walk away if they want to. And so ideally, if somebody can homeschool for those reasons I mentioned, I think that's the best thing. Christian school and public school, it all depends upon um, the quality of that school. I like Christian schooling because teachers can talk openly about their faith, but not necessarily assuming because it's a Christian school, it's going to be the best environment. We learned when our girls were in Christian school for 2 years that a lot of families who had troubled kids, who weren't necessarily Christian families, would drop their kids off at Christian school, expecting the schools and the students and or the teachers to raise their kids and to teach their kids. And there were lots of kids that we experienced at Christian school that were trouble kids, and they were there because they were kicked out of public school. And so there's no, I'm not marginalizing the importance of Christian school. I'm just saying that parents need to be aware that those are some dynamics that we didn't understand. We even saw Christian schools, the families that were very, very well off financially and those who weren't, and how the kids in well off families would kind of have a condescending approach and attitude towards the families that weren't well off based upon were their uniforms brand new or were they resale? What kind of car did they drive up in when they were dropped off to school? I mean, we experienced that. We experienced that. We even had an experience with one of our daughters, our youngest daughter, where that was bullied badly by a kid in Christian school. She was like the sweetest little girl all the way up until we put her into that school and she got bullied and I think she's changed forever as a
Yeah.
result, forever because of that bullying. And so again, I'm not speaking condescendingly about Christian school. I'm just saying, parents, you need to be aware that just because you send a kid to Christian school doesn't mean your kids to Christian school doesn't mean everything's going to be peachy, rosy, wonderful. And so just be cognizant that every kid has their own learning temperament. They have their own desires in terms of how they're being taught. Parents should be, again, be guides to that. Try to adjust accordingly. And then ideally homeschool first, Christian school second, public school third.
Yeah, and what do you think? What's your ideas about the concept of unschooling?
Do you mean like you just don't teach them like reading, writing, arithmetic? You just kind of teach them on life about going along? Is that what you mean?
I think that's what the concept is, that people are not having any formal type of education.
Uh,
Kind of mixed feelings about it. I think a lot of it has to do with the family and the parents. For example, there's one family that I know who did not get into the I know not into the reading. I don't know about the writing portion until the kids were 8, 9, 10. They had boys and they just weren't ready. And so they were learning a lot of other things because they lived on a farm. So they were still learning, it just wasn't the formal education. Well, now looking at each one of those boys, they've gone into two are in the no, I think all three are in the medical field in varying degrees. And you would never know they didn't start learning formally until they were between 8 and 10.
mhm.
And
Yeah,
that was intentionally handled that way because they just weren't necessarily ready for that at a younger age. And so for this particular family, I've seen it work very, very well and have watched or seen as the boys have all gone into medical careers.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I go back to about recognizing the difference and uniqueness of your kids. I remember the frustration we had with one of our daughters in potty training, and it was so frustrating for Jan. And we were talking to our next door neighbor who is a family counselor, and she says, listen, when she's ready, she's going to do it. You're not going to send a 14-year-old to school wearing diapers. So stop, take the pressure off. Don't think that you have to be potty trained by this age. Well, similarly, I think kids learn in advance in different ways. And
yeah,
your organized, structured school setting, whether it's public school or Christian school,
Or even homeschooling.
yeah, or I was going to say the organized schooling is you have a teacher that's teaching anywhere from 12 to 25,
Sit
even 30
yourself.
kids in a room. You can only teach to the average. So you're going to have your bell curve. Those are those on the slower, harder learners. You're going to have your majority, and then you're going to have those that are advanced. And so you're going to be able to teaching the average. You're going to be okay with those that are in the middle. But those people who are slower and make more time, they're going to get frustrated. They're going to get discouraged. They're going to think they're dumb, and they're going to want to give up. Those who are on the other end of the bell curve, they're like, this is too easy. I'm not being challenged. School's boring because this is too easy. And so the unlearning portion of it, or the homeschooling portion, allows you to be able to guide your sons or your daughters based upon their capacity, based upon their development. As long as I think the key thing is they don't sit at home every morning playing video games, watching TV, doing nothing. They have to learn the responsibility of hard work, discipline, testing, success, failures. That's all part of the journey of life, and then of course eventually you have to read and stuff. But I'm also a big believer you have to learn the history of the country that you're in. You have to learn history from, at least of course in our situation, American history, how we were founded, what the motivations were of the founders, why America is so unique compared to other countries founded throughout history. Those things somewhere along the line, I think those things need to definitely be taught one way or another, and that could be done by going to museums or going to historical you know places or whatever and learning the history that way. It doesn't have to be just from a textbook.
right. That's a good point.
Hmm.
There's so many ways to learn things, and a lot of people are just not good book learners. We are more
Right.
hands-on and visual.
Hmm.
So I think that's might even be a better way, and then just follow up with like a quiz. What did you learn about?
Well,
Did
it's kind
you
of fun.
did you learn anything?
Right.
I'll give you an example. So our 7-year-old grandson uh, just learned about this series called I Survived. And the series I Survived is all about disasters that have happened throughout human history. I survived the sinking of the Titanic. I survived the Hindenburg. I survived 9/11. I survived the grizzly bear attack. I survived, I mean, all these different like disasters, Pearl Harbor. And so they're kind of written from a kid's perspective. It's a fictional account of factual events where a kid is like the story that has been written is a kid experiencing that told in the first person. Again, the fictional account, but factual event. And so now our grandson, he's so mesmerized by these things. He can tell you dates and times and why the Titanic sank and why the Hindenburg exploded and why Pearl Harbor was bombed. I mean, he knows the history through something like that. So it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be limited to just a textbook.
That is a really good example.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know from myself, I was in public school the whole way, and it was my senior year of high school that I really started doing well.
Hmm.
And then I went to college and I was like, maybe it's because our brains aren't fully developed till we're in our 20s. Or I had done different programs, but really thinking about it, I had started following Jesus. And I
Hmm.
think that that is the thing that really transformed me because before that, my education was I went to school to socialize. That was
Yeah,
my only reason for being there.
nothing
And
wrong with
I
that.
wasn't a good student at all because I was a very slow learner and I still love learning. I always loved learning. It's just I could not keep up with my peers. I could not relate. I always felt like something was really wrong with me. But now I know, it's not because I don't love learning. It's not because I'm not smart. It's just because I needed to learn in a different way.
And you know what?
Yeah.
I'm going to add something personal story on that, but similar tied into what you just said. Our oldest daughter, Jen, really struggled with her with reading and writing and math and some, the core things. And it was really frustrating. Well, we signed her up for Spanish class when we put her in this Christian school, and she was just like so discouraged. She'd always felt like she was dumb because she wasn't capturing things. So we had her tested, and we found out and discovered,
No.
no,
She made a comment one day at the table trying to do trying to do her homework. I wish these letters would just stop moving. I never understood that she was dyslexic.
Hmm.
In my frustration with her through the early years, we kind of moved to a lot of verbal testing, verbal quizzes, verbal um, everything pretty much, because then we weren't at odds with each other. And I know she's a smart cookie. I
yes.
knew growing up she was a really smart cookie. I just thought she didn't want to um, do
We
have,
thought she was textbook lazy.
yes,
We didn't even try.
yeah,
And that kind of really, so we got her tested, and this is where she was taking Spanish class, and it was even worse. And so when we found that
because
out,
she couldn't fake it.
yeah, she couldn't fake it anymore. Then we said, hey, the school had American Sign Language, which is all visual, right? All visual learning. She picked it up on it like
Yeah,
that. Oh my gosh.
yeah,
In
she was
at
really good with that.
In fact, even after only like 6 weeks, if I'm correct, her American Sign Language teacher asked her to help teach some of the other kids that had already been taking it for 2 years or 3 years, if I'm correct. So we learned she's a visual learner. Show her how to do it and she'll do it. And we also transitioned to her taking, like you said, verbal exams, and
Yeah.
she thrived because, as Jan said, she was smart, but not your textbook type of smart.
Well, it was translating as trying to make sense of the letters that were on the page
Yeah.
and translating that to thought and
Hmm.
then back again was difficult.
And that comes all the way full circle back to what started this all as homeschooling gives you a lot of that flexibility to be able to modify and adjust so that if you have two kids and they're great apart and your younger kid is as capable as your older kid in math or whatever it is, then do math together at that point. Don't say, well, you have to wait till next year before you can do that kind of math. So it's just an example.
Yeah. One last thing I want to share. Yesterday, I saw a social media piece where the woman was sharing uh, an illustration on this whiteboard of how when you're in homeschool compared to uh, sending your children off to be educated elsewhere, you have probably 2 to 5 hours of time where they're at home per day, as opposed to, um, the whole waking hours, like 12 hours. So it's
Mm,
quite a significant time that we're allowing others to be the model for our kids. And
Mhm.
if those models are they don't match up with your values, then you're really missing the whole point of parenting, I think. You can instill your values through on the weekend and in the evening, but is that really enough, to make a
right,
difference? Because those short hours, if you're doing it that way, are actually being spent eating and getting ready for bed and things like that. So it's not really a lot of time to invest in, you know, modeling character and things like that.
right.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I just feel like for especially Christians, God is calling people to homeschooling,
Mhm.
and he desires for people to prosper financially. I wanted to ask actually one more thing about the financial literacy. How did you, and if you did, how did you teach your girls financial literacy?
Well, we taught them. They're just not practicing it very well at this point. But I actually taught a financial literacy class for teens for a number of years. We were part of another nonprofit organization, and that was one of the things that they did is they offered a financial literacy class for kids between 13 and 19 years old. And so our daughters attended those classes several times. And I taught it was about I think it's about 10 hours, I think, is what
Mhm.
it was of courseware where we covered money and how the economic system works and inflation and debt, good debt, bad debt, credit, all this kind of these things like that. So they we taught it, they caught it, we taught it, they were involved in it. They're still struggling with it. I mean, it's kind of a life, I think sometimes it can be a lifetime thing, but
I
what
was
I
going to
try
say, how did you see how it has benefited them?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're learning kind of the hard way right now by making some decisions that aren't the best, and so that was one of the things where, as a parent, how I look at it is that our responsibility is to teach our kids the best way we can. It's their responsibility to apply what we taught. So if they don't do well in a particular area that we have taught in, we as parents have to be careful not to feel like it was our fault, that
Hmm.
we are responsible for it. Every young person, every person, period, has agency for their own life. And it's up to them to determine what route they're going to take, what road they're going to take. We can want something more for our kids that they ever want for themselves and maybe not accomplish it. Likewise, I've also known a lot of parents who just weren't really involved in their kid's life, but because of the way the kid was wired, they always strove to achieve more and to be more successful. So I've known great kids that have come from awful parents and awful kids that have come from great parents. It's not the person necessarily in terms of the parenting, but that we have a responsibility before God to teach our kids, to train them, that when we're to wear God's precepts on our heads and our heads and our wrists and our hands, to talk about God's precepts where when we go to bed at night and when we get up in the morning, when we're at home and when we're on the road, Deuteronomy chapter 11. That's our responsibility is to teach our kids those things. It's up to each kid to determine how they're going to apply those.
Yeah. I like the phrase fail forward because I
Hmm.
feel like we have to look at failure as an opportunity for growth and
Hmm.
not, that especially when we're looking at our children, like you said, they're still learning. Well, it's just like we're still learning.
Hmm.
Mhm.
We never stop learning, and there's always opportunity for growth, especially when we fail. When it's painful, then you remember, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Well,
that's actually one of the lessons we have in crop. We talk about is failure. We should never ever be afraid of failure because every great thing that ever has been accomplished was preceded by numerous failures, numerous. And so true failure is when you give up or you don't even try. That's true failure. But anything else is successfully learning what didn't work, and so don't be afraid of that because we're all going to have setbacks. Just figure out what you need to do to adjust, to pivot, to fine tune so that you can eventually have that success.
Well, thank you both for allowing me this opportunity to interview you. And I know that our viewers are going to find a lot of golden nuggets and of wisdom for their own experience of homeschooling and entrepreneurship. Thank
We
you.
hope so. Yeah, you're
yeah,
welcome. Thanks for having us.
thank you.
If this conversation encouraged you, subscribe, share it with a friend, and join us in the Homeschoolpreneurs community. Until next time, keep building the future together.